Admiral Ta stood frozen at the command center's main console. His 4 blue tentacles trembled as they gripped the edge of the metal surface. The reports kept coming in, each one worse than the last. "Sir, Outpost Serum has gone dark," announced Officer Da, her silver skin reflecting the flashing red emergency lights. "That's the 3rd one in 7 hours," Ta whispered. He blinked his large oval eyes, trying to process what was happening. The main view screen showed the last transmission from Outpost Serum. A massive human warship had appeared without warning, its dark hull bristling with what looked like weapons. Then static. No one in the Galactic Alliance had expected this. Humans were supposed to be a minor species from a small water-rich planet at the edge of the Midrim. Their technology was thought to be primitive, their space travel limited. Yet here they were, appearing at will near key Alliance outposts, which then mysteriously fell silent. "Play the last transmission from Outpost Moon again," Tide ordered, his voice steadier than he felt. The screen flickered. A panicked green-skinned Trizillian appeared, her eye stalks waving frantically. They just appeared. No warp signature, no jump distortion. 1 minute empty space, the next, human ships. "They're scanning us with some kind of energy we've never seen. Our systems are failing. We need immediate." The transmission cut to static. Tay's second in command, Commander Jun, stepped closer. "Sir, we have tracked their movement pattern." Jun's voice was calm despite the chaos around them. "They seem to be following a specific path through our territory." On the tactical display, a red line connected the 3 fallen outposts. The line continued onward, potentially threatening 5 more Alliance installations. "Get me Director Hyun immediately," Tide ordered, his tentacles tightening around his command staff. "The Council must be informed. These humans, they attack without any diplomatic overture. It defies all galactic protocol." While waiting for the connection, Tai studied the human ships on screen. They were unlike anything in the Alliance database. Black, angular, with strange blue lights pulsing along their hulls. They moved with precision that suggested advanced navigation systems. "What do we know about human warfare?" Tai asked the room. Science Officer Min stepped forward. "Very little, Admiral. Our records show they spent much of their history fighting among themselves. But since achieving space travel, they've been quiet. No conflicts with other species have been recorded. Until now," Ta said grimly. The screen flickered, and Director Han's face appeared. As the head of the Galactic Council's Defense Committee, Hyun had the power to authorize full military response. His purple face looked tired, his normally bright yellow eyes dimmed with concern. "Admiral Ta, I've been receiving the reports. Is it true? The humans are attacking. 3 outposts gone dark after human ships appeared nearby. No communication, no demands, no warning," Tay reported. "Director, I request permission to deploy the 4th Fleet to intercept them before they reach Starbase Wook." Hyun's expression darkened. "The Council is divided. Some believe we should attempt communication first. We've tried. Sir, they don't respond to any standard frequencies. Perhaps they don't understand our communication methods," Hyun suggested. Taz's tentacles twitched in frustration. "With respect, Director, they've mastered some form of advanced travel technology that bypasses all our detection systems. I doubt they lack the ability to answer a simple hail." A junior officer rushed to Taz's side, holding a datapad. "Admiral, we've detected energy readings from the human vessels. They're unusual." Ta glanced at the readings and felt his heart sink. "These energy signatures, they're like nothing in our database. Director, whatever weapons they're using, we may not be prepared for them." Hyun was silent for a moment. "Deploy the 4th Fleet, Admiral, but maintain distance. Observe and analyze. Attack only if directly threatened. And what about Starbase Wook? There are over 7,000 civilians there. Begin evacuation procedures immediately," Hyun ordered. I'll convene an emergency council session." The connection ended. Ta immediately turned to his staff. "Send evacuation orders to Starbase Wook and all outposts in this sector. Alert the 4th Fleet. Battle stations, but defensive posture only." As his crew rushed to obey, Tai returned his gaze to the view screen. The path of the human fleet was displayed in glowing red. They moved methodically, with a purpose that suggested careful planning. What do they want? Ta wondered aloud. Why no communication, no demands? Commander Jun had no answer. Perhaps they believe actions speak louder than words, Admiral. Ta watched as the tactical display updated, showing the human fleet's continued advance. "Prepare my ship," he decided suddenly. "I will lead the 4th Fleet myself." "Sir," Jun questioned, "if these humans want war, I need to see them with my own eyes," Ta said. "I need to understand what we're facing." As he headed toward the door, Ta cast one last look at the view screen. The human ships continued their silent, inexorable approach, bringing with them a mystery that might soon become the greatest threat the Galactic Alliance had ever faced. Admiral Tay's war room buzzed with nervous energy. The curved walls displayed real-time updates from across the sector, most flashing red with warnings. In the center of the room, Commander Jin stood before the gathered intelligence team, her expression tight with concern. "What do we actually know about them?" Jin asked, gesturing to the holographic file floating above the table. The file was disturbingly thin, containing only basic information about the human species. Science Officer Sunwoo adjusted the settings on her ocular enhancers, the mechanical lenses whirring as they focused on the sparse data. She was the Alliance's foremost expert on emerging species, yet her knowledge of humans was embarrassingly limited. "Remarkably little," Sunwoo admitted. "They were considered a minor species from a resource-poor system. Their planet is mostly water with limited rare minerals. Until now, we believe their technology was at least a century behind ours." A hologram changed to show footage from Outpost Surum's final transmission. A human ship appeared suddenly in empty space, without any of the usual visual distortions that accompanied faster-than-light travel. "This technology they're using, it's beyond our understanding," Sunwoo continued. "They're somehow bypassing our detection networks completely. No warp signature, no jump distortion, no subspace ripples." "Could they have been hiding this capability?" asked Fleet Captain Quan, his scaled fingers tapping nervously on the table. "A deliberate deception." Sunwoo shook her head. "Our monitoring stations have observed their homeworld for decades. There was no sign of this technology in development." "Then how did they make such a leap?" Jin pressed. "No species advances from standard warp drives to, whatever this is, without intermediate steps." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Either the humans had hidden their true capabilities for years, or they had somehow acquired advanced technology from another source. "Perhaps," Jin suggested after a moment, "they operate on fundamentally different diplomatic principles. Maybe this is their form of first contact." The room fell silent at the troubling thought. If you couldn't understand your enemy, how could you predict their next move? Intelligence Officer Wan, who had been analyzing the attack patterns, looked up from his datapad. "Their movements suggest they're searching for something. Look at the pattern." He transferred his findings to the main display. The human fleet's path now appeared as a methodical grid search, moving systematically through Alliance space. "They're not attacking population centers or military bases," Juan noted. "Only outposts with deep space sensing equipment." What could they be looking for? Jin wondered. Admiral Tai, who had been silently observing from the edge of the room, finally spoke. "Or what are they running from?" All eyes turned to the Admiral as he stepped forward. "Sir?" Jin questioned. "Consider this," Ta said, his tentacles gesturing to the display. "A previously unremarkable species suddenly appears with advanced technology, targeting our sensor outposts. What if they're not attacking us, but rather eliminating our ability to detect something else?" The idea sent a ripple of unease through the room. We need more information, Ty decided. Bring me everything we have on human history, culture, language, anything that might help us understand their motivations. I have something, Admiral, said cultural specialist Min, who had been quiet until now. She projected a series of human historical documents onto the main screen. Humans have a pattern in their history of acting preemptively when they perceive threats. The documents showed various human conflicts, each preceded by actions that could be interpreted as defensive or aggressive, depending on perspective. They attack first and explain later, Jin asked, troubled. Not exactly, Min clarified. They often attempt warnings, but their communication style is direct. They expect immediate action once a threat is identified. When they don't get it, they sometimes act unilaterally. Sunwoo suddenly straightened. Admiral, what if we've missed something? What if they've been trying to communicate? She quickly accessed the raw data from the outposts before they went dark. There were unusual energy patterns we dismissed as weapon signatures, but what if their communication attempts using technology we don't understand? Can you decode it? Tai asked. Not without more samples, Sunwoo admitted, but if I could get closer to one of their ships. Admiral Tai considered this for a long moment. Too risky, but we need to establish communication somehow. What about the human trading vessel we detained last cycle? Jin suggested. The pilot is still in holding at Starbase Wook. Tai's eyes widened. Get that human to me immediately, and prepare a translation team. As the officers rushed to comply, Tai turned back to the display showing the approaching human fleet. In 6 hours, they would reach Starbase Wook. The evacuation was only half complete. If we can't understand them soon, Ta said quietly, we may have no choice but to assume the worst. Sunwoo's instruments beeped with an alert. Admiral, I'm detecting new energy signatures from the human vessels. They're changing formation. The display updated to show the human ships accelerating towards Starbase Wook, no longer in search pattern but in attack formation. Time's up, Ta said grimly. Battle stations. Communication specialist Yuan rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the screen before her. For 18 hours straight, she had analyzed the strange transmission patterns from the human vessels. The small room deep within Starbase Wook had become her prison, walls covered with data projections and half-empty cups of stimulant. Something wasn't right. The Alliance had interpreted the energy bursts from the human ships as weapons fire. The same energy bursts that preceded each outpost going dark. It made perfect sense, yet the pattern bothered Ian. Weapons fire should be directed, focused. These energy waves spread in expanding circles, washing over everything in their path. Computer, run comparison analysis between these energy signatures and all known scan types in the database, Ian ordered, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. The computer hummed. No exact match found. Closest analog. Krellian deep penetration, geological survey equipment, 78% similarity. Sat up straight. Geological survey equipment. The Krellians used those powerful scans to detect resources deep within planets. They were harmless to living beings but wreaked havoc on certain types of electronic systems. She quickly pulled up the technical specifications for the affected outposts. All three used the same communication array design, one that operated on frequencies that would be particularly vulnerable to Krellian-type scanning technology. It can't be that simple, she muttered, but her hands were already flying over the controls, reinterpreting the data under this new assumption. On the main deck of Starbase Wook, Admiral Tai and the War Council were deep in discussion. The human fleet was less than an hour away. The Fourth Fleet had taken defensive positions, and evacuation ships were departing every few minutes, loaded with civilians. We must assume their intentions are hostile, General Mock was saying. 3 outposts destroyed, no response to communications. The door to the council chamber slid open. Communication specialist Ian rushed in, clutching the datapad. Protocol dictated that junior officers never interrupt the War Council, but the guards had let her pass after seeing her security clearance. "Admiral," she said, interrupting the War Council, "these aren't attack patterns. The energy signatures we're detecting. They're scans, powerful ones." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the disheveled specialist who dared interrupt the highest military gathering in the sector. Admiral Tay's 4 tentacles tensed. "Explain yourself, specialist." Unn stepped forward, placing her datapad on the table. It projected her findings above the surface. "The energy bursts we've been interpreting as weapons fire are actually scanning waves, similar to Krellian geological survey equipment, but much more powerful. They're designed to penetrate deeply and gather data, not to destroy." General Mock scoffed. "And the missing outposts? I suppose they just happened to disappear after being scanned." "And the missing outposts?" Admiral Todd echoed, his tone more measured but equally skeptical. "Not destroyed. Evacuated. By the humans." She displayed the corrected translation matrix. "They've been sending warnings, sir. Warnings we've been misinterpreting as threats." Unn activated another display showing what appeared to be garbled communications data. "These transmissions accompanied each scan. We thought they were targeting data for weapons, but they're actually messages. Our translation matrices weren't configured to recognize their communication format." She pressed a button, and a rough translation appeared. "Danger a Pro Ching. Evacuation necessary. Will assist. Respond if able." The council chamber erupted in confused voices. "Silence," Ta commanded. When quiet returned, he turned to Unn. "You're certain of this?" "I've cross-referenced with the human language files we have. It's not perfect, but the intent is clear. They're warning us about something." "Warning us about what?" Commander Jin asked. "I don't know yet," Unn admitted. "But there's more. I've analyzed the movement of the human ships after each outpost went dark. They didn't leave immediately. They stayed for approximately 20 minutes, exactly the time needed to evacuate the personnel to their vessels." Tactical Officer Da looked up from his console. "Admiral, we've been unable to contact any of the outpost personnel. If they were evacuated, where are they?" "Likely aboard the human vessels," Unn suggested. "Our communication systems might not be compatible with theirs once our people are on their ships." Admiral Ta paced slowly around the table, his tentacles swaying in thought. "If what you say is true, specialist, we've been preparing for war against potential allies. Or it could be an elaborate deception," General Mock warned. "A way to make us lower our defenses." "The human fleet will be here in 40 minutes, Commander Jin noted. "We need to decide now how to respond." Admiral Ta turned to Unn. "Can you reconfigure our communication systems to properly receive and translate their messages?" "I already have, sir," Unn said, handing him a small device. "This will interface with your command console." Tay took the device and moved to the main communication station. "Clear all channels. I want to broadcast on all frequencies using this new configuration." As the crew scrambled to comply, Unn felt a mixture of hope and fear. If she was wrong, she had just convinced the Admiral to lower their defenses against an invading force. If she was right, she had prevented an unnecessary war. "Broadcast ready, Admiral," the communications officer announced. Tai took a deep breath. "This is Admiral Ta of the Galactic Alliance. We have received your warnings but did not properly understand them. We are prepared to communicate. Please identify the danger you speak of." The room waited in tense silence. Seconds stretched into minutes with no response. "Sir," a sensor operator called out, "the human fleet has changed course. They're slowing down." A new energy signature appeared on the scanners, different from the previous ones. Then, the communication console lit up with an incoming transmission. "Alliance vessel," came a voice, slightly distorted but clearly understandable. "This is Captain Park of the Earth Emergency Response Fleet. Thank you for finally answering. We have your outpost personnel safe aboard our ships. There isn't much time. Something is coming. Something terrible. Communication specialist Yun stared at the transmission patterns until her eyes burned. For 3 days straight, she had barely left her small workstation aboard the command carrier. The flickering blue light of her screen cast shadows across her tired face as she studied the data from the human ships. Everyone else saw weapons signatures. Everyone else saw attacks. But something wasn't right. Ian zoomed in on the energy pattern from the last human attack on Outpost Moon. The waves didn't match any weapon in the Alliance database. They spread too widely, too uniformly. Weapons fire was focused, directed. This was something else entirely. She pulled up the reports from the 3 silent outposts. Each had experienced the same pattern. Human ships appeared without warning, emitted the strange energy waves, and then the outposts went dark. The Alliance assumed destruction, but there were no debris fields, no radiation signatures typical of an attack. Computer, compare these energy patterns to all known scanning technologies, Yun said, her voice rough from lack of sleep. The computer chirped as it worked. No exact match found. Closest comparison. Deep space mapping arrays used by the Toral Mining Consortium. 82% similarity. Yun sat up straight. Mining scanners. Those were designed to penetrate planetary crusts, not to destroy stations. She quickly accessed the communication logs from each outpost. In the moments before they went silent, each had reported system failures, but not explosions or hull breaches. Their communication systems had simply stopped working. What if the energy waves overloaded their comm systems? She whispered to herself. What if the outposts aren't destroyed at all? With renewed energy, Yun began reanalyzing the strange data packets that had accompanied each energy burst. The Alliance had assumed they were targeting data for weapons. But what if they were something else entirely? She ran the packets through a different translation filter, one designed for scientific data rather than military communications. Slowly, fragments began to make sense. Danger, approaching. Evacuate. Assist. Yun read aloud, piecing together the broken translation. Her heart raced as the truth dawned on her. They're not attacking us. They're trying to save us from something. Yun gathered her data pads and ran from her station. Protocol demanded she report through proper channels, but there wasn't time. The human fleet would reach Starbase Wook in less than an hour, and the Alliance ships were preparing to fire on them. She sprinted through the corridors of the command carrier, pushing past startled crew members. When she reached the war room, 2 guards blocked her path. "I need to see Admiral Ta immediately," she insisted. "It's about the humans. I have critical information." "The War Council is in session," one guard said firmly. "No interruptions." "People will die if I don't speak to him now," Yun said, her voice rising. "The humans aren't attacking us." The door to the war room opened. Commander Jin stood there, frowning. "What is this commotion?" "Commander, please," Yun said, holding up her datapad. "I've discovered something about the human transmissions. It changes everything." Jin studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Come in. Quickly." Inside the war room, Admiral Ta and 5 other high-ranking officers stood around a holographic display of the approaching human fleet. They all turned to stare as Yun entered. "Admiral," she said, interrupting the War Council. "These aren't attack patterns. The energy signatures we're detecting. They're scans. Powerful ones." Admiral Ta's 4 tentacles stiffened in surprise. "Specialist Yun. This had better be important to justify this interruption." "It is, sir," Yun said, connecting her data pad to the main display. The screen filled with her analysis. "The energy bursts we thought were weapons fire are actually advanced scanning technology, similar to deep space mining equipment but much more powerful." General Yun scoffed. "Ridiculous. Why would they scan our outposts?" "And the missing outposts?" Admiral Ta demanded, his voice stern but his eyes showing a flicker of interest. "Not destroyed. Evacuated. by the humans. She displayed the corrected translation matrix. They'd been sending warnings, sir. Warnings we've been misinterpreting as threats. The room fell silent as her data filled the main screen. The revised translations of the human messages appeared. Danger approaching your space. Evacuation necessary. Will assist removal of personnel. Respond if able to communicate. This can't be right, General Yoon said, but his voice lacked conviction. It explains why there's no debris field. Commander Jin said slowly. No signs of destruction. If the humans were evacuating our people, where are they now? Asked Tactical Officer Sung. Elam pulled up another display. I believe they're aboard the human vessels, sir. I've detected faint Alliance emergency beacons moving with the human fleet. Our people are alive. Admiral Ta moved closer to the display, studying the data with all four of his eyes. If you're right, we've completely misunderstood their intentions. But what danger are they warning us about? I don't know, sir, Yun admitted. The translations are still rough. But whatever it is, the humans think it's serious enough to bypass all diplomatic channels and take direct action. Or this could be an elaborate deception, General Yoon warned. A way to make us lower our defenses before they strike. Admiral Tai was silent for a long moment, his tentacles moving in the complex pattern that indicated deep thought. Finally, he turned to Communications Officer Choi. Open a channel to the human fleet, he ordered. Use Specialist Yun's translation matrix. Sir, Choi looked startled. Do it now, and tell the fleet to hold their fire unless I give the direct order. As Choi worked to establish communication, Tai turned back to Yun. If you're wrong about this, Specialist, you may have doomed this station and everyone on it. Yun swallowed hard. And if I'm right, sir, we were about to fire on the only people who might be able to help us. The main screen flickered, then stabilized, showing the human face. The being had no tentacles, no scales, just smooth skin and two eyes. It looked strangely vulnerable. This is Captain Ba of the Earth Emergency Response Fleet, the human said, looking relieved. Thank the stars you finally answered. We've been trying to reach you for days. This is Admiral Ta of the Galactic Alliance. We may have misinterpreted your actions. What is this danger you warn of? The human's expression darkened. They're called the Void Swarm. They've already consumed 3 systems near Earth. We detected them approaching your space and came to help evacuate. There's not much time. As if on cue, long-range sensors began to sound alarms. Something massive was entering Alliance space, something unlike anything they had seen before. Too late, the human captain said grimly. They're here. The massive black tendrils appeared on the long-range scanners, stretching across the view screen like living shadows. The command center fell silent as everyone stared at the horrifying sight. What had been theoretical moments ago was now undeniably real. The Void Swarm had reached the galaxy's edge. Magnify Sector 7, Admiral Tat ordered, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his 4 hearts. The screen zoomed in on one tendril. It wasn't solid matter but seemed composed of millions of tiny organisms moving together like a liquid. Where it touched a small asteroid, the rock simply disappeared, absorbed into the writhing mass. It's consuming everything, Science Officer Sunwoo whispered. Her instruments recorded the event with clinical precision, but her voice betrayed her terror. How fast are they moving? Admiral Tai asked. At current speed, they will reach Starbase Wook in less than 10 hours. Tactical Officer Sung reported. The outer colonies in 4. The emergency transmission system chimed. Director Hyun appeared on the secondary screen, his purple face ashen as he addressed the hastily assembled Galactic Council behind him. The humans detected them first, Director Hyun explained to the stunned council members. They tried to warn us through official channels, but we dismissed them. Their ambassador was told to file a proper report and wait for our scientists to verify their claims, which could have taken months. A council member muttered. Precisely, Hyun continued. Faced with our inaction, they took matters into their own hands. Their ships have been evacuating our outposts directly in the path of this swarm. On the main view screen, the human fleet had taken position between Starbase Wook and the approaching swarm. Their black ships seemed tiny against the vast darkness spreading toward them. The communication system activated. Captain Du of the human fleet appeared on screen. Unlike the other humans they had seen, Captain Du's face bore scars, and his left eye had been replaced with a cybernetic implant that glowed faintly blue. Admiral Tai, Du acknowledged with a curt nod. I see your sensors have finally detected what we've been trying to tell you about. Ta straightened his posture. Captain Du, we owe you an apology for the misunderstanding. We are grateful for your efforts to evacuate our outposts. Save it, Du replied bluntly. We've been fighting them for weeks. Your bureaucracy would have doomed you all. Now we need to focus on survival. Some of the Alliance officers bristled at the humans' direct manner, but Admiral Tai simply nodded. What can you tell us about this enemy? We call them the Void Swarm. They appeared in our space 3 months ago. They consume everything. Matter, energy, even light itself. Conventional weapons are useless. They simply absorb the energy. How have you been fighting them? Commander Jin asked. With difficulty, Du answered grimly. We've found only one effective method. A specific frequency of quantum disruption that seems to break down their cohesion. We've equipped our ships with disruptors, but they have limited range and power. Tactical displays showed the human vessels now deploying into a defensive formation. Smaller craft moved between the larger ships, carrying equipment Ta didn't recognize. Captain, we have over 15,000 civilians on Starbase Wook, Ta said. Evacuation is underway, but we need more time. Du's expression softened slightly. That's why we're here, Admiral. My ships will create a barrier to slow their advance. But I need your fleet to coordinate with us. Of course, Tai agreed immediately. Commander Jin, assign our ships to Captain Du's command for this operation. Jin looked shocked. Sir, protocol requires. Protocol won't save us from the Void Swarm, Tai interrupted. The humans have combat experience against this enemy. We don't. The meeting was interrupted as Emergency Coordinator Han burst into the command center. Admiral, the outer colony, Shin, has gone dark. The evacuation ships never made it out. A heavy silence fell over the room. 5,000 lives, gone in an instant. Show me, Ta demanded. The screen shifted to show where Colony Shin had been. Now there was only empty space and a tendril of the swarm, noticeably larger than before. They feed, Captain Du said quietly. Every bit of matter they consume makes them stronger, faster. Science Officer Sunwoo, who had been analyzing the swarm's composition, looked up from her station. Admiral, based on these readings, the swarm's rate of consumption is exponential. If unchecked, they could devour the entire sector in weeks, the galaxy in years. Why haven't we heard of them before? Jin asked. Something this destructive should have been detected long ago. We believe they came through what you would call a dimensional rift, Du explained. Our scientists detected unusual energy signatures weeks before their arrival. By the time we understood what was happening, they had already consumed an uninhabited system. Admiral Tag turned to address the command center crew. All personnel, this is now a level 1 emergency. All military protocols are activated. Civilian evacuation is our priority. He turned back to Captain Du. What do you need from us to deploy your disruptors? Energy, Du replied. Our quantum disruptors require massive power, more than our ships can generate alone. The starbase has 4 Class 5 fusion reactors, Tai offered. Would that be sufficient? Du nodded. That would power a disruption field large enough to create a corridor for evacuation, but we'll need to set up directly on the starbase. Make it happen, Tai ordered. Commander Jin, assign our best engineers to assist the humans. Director Hyun, We need every available evacuation ship in the sector redirected here immediately." As the command center burst into frantic activity, Ta moved closer to the view screen, studying the approaching darkness. In his centuries of service, he had never faced an enemy like this, one that couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be intimidated, couldn't be stopped by conventional means. "Captain Du," he said quietly, "do your people believe we can defeat this swarm?" Du's scarred face was grim. "Defeat? No. Survive? Maybe, if we work together." It wasn't the answer Ta had hoped for, but it was honest. And right now, honesty was more valuable than false hope. "Then let's get to work," Ta said. The first joint defense meeting was tense. The emergency conference room aboard Starbase Wook had been hastily converted to accommodate both Alliance officials and human representatives. The room was divided by more than just the long metal table at its center. On one side sat the carefully arranged galactic representatives in their formal attire, data pads neatly aligned before them. On the other side, the humans stood or sat in what appeared to be battle-worn uniforms, some still carrying equipment from their ships. Human Commander Minho stood before the gathered officials, his tall frame rigid with barely contained frustration. Unlike Captain Du, who remained on the front lines with the fleet, Minho had been sent to coordinate the joint defense effort. His dark eyes scanned the room, taking in the elaborate uniforms and ceremonial markings of the Alliance officials with poorly disguised impatience. "We have less than 6 hours before the main body of the swarm reaches this position," Minho began, skipping the formal greetings the Alliance representatives had expected. He activated a holographic display showing the void swarm's advance. "My engineers need immediate access to your power grid to begin installation of the quantum disruptors." Director Hyun cleared his throat. "Commander Minho, we appreciate your assistance, but there are procedures to follow. The Council requires a full briefing on this technology before we can. While your Council debated proper response protocols, we lost 3 colony ships evacuating your people," Minho stated flatly. He projected images of the lost ships, their names and crew counts displayed beneath each one. 422 Alliance citizens who might have survived if we hadn't been waiting for permission to act. The room fell silent. The lost ships had been reported, but seeing them displayed so bluntly made the loss immediate and personal. Senior Council member Yuna leaned forward. "Commander, we understand the urgency, but you must understand that allowing unknown technology to be connected to a starbase's power core presents significant security concerns." "Security concerns." Minho's voice remained level, but his hands clenched at his sides. "The void swarm will consume this entire station in hours. There won't be security concerns when everyone here is dead." Admiral Tai, who had been silent until now, bristled at Minho's tone. "Our protocols exist for a reason, Commander. Millennium of peace among the Alliance races have been maintained through careful adherence to established procedures. We cannot simply. Will mean nothing if we're all consumed," Minho interrupted, pointing to the advancing darkness on the holographic display. "You need our weapons. We need your numbers. Can we move past this?" The Alliance was uncomfortable, but necessary. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a blade. Admiral Ta studied the human commander for a long moment. Though he found the human's directness offensive, he couldn't deny the logic of his argument. The protocols that had served the Alliance for centuries weren't designed for an enemy like the Void Swarm. "Very well," Ta finally said. "You have authorization to connect your disruptors to our power grid. Commander Jin will provide whatever assistance your engineers require." Several council members began to protest, but Director Han silenced them with a raised hand. "The Admiral has command authority during a Level 1 emergency. His decision stands." Minho nodded curtly. "Thank you. My engineers are waiting outside with the equipment." As if on cue, the doors opened and a team of humans entered, carrying large metal containers. They moved with practiced efficiency, not waiting for further permission before beginning to unpack their gear. "Perhaps," Admiral Ta suggested, watching the humans work, You could explain how these disruptors functioned while your team sets up. Minho seemed to relax slightly at the practical request. He gestured to one of the devices being assembled. The swarm exists partially in our dimension and partially in another. They're held together by a quantum field that allows them to consume matter and energy. These disruptors emit a specially modulated frequency that disrupts that field, causing the individual organisms to lose cohesion. Science Officer Sunwoo approached one of the devices with obvious fascination. How did you discover this weakness? Trial and error, Minho said grimly. We lost 17 ships and 3 outposts before we found something that worked. As the humans continued setting up their equipment, Communication Specialist Lun entered the room, looking exhausted but determined. Admiral, I've been analyzing the swarm's movement patterns. There's something odd about their approach. Explain, Ta prompted. Displayed her findings on the main screen. They're not moving in a random consumption pattern. They're targeting specific locations, primarily communication hubs and sensor arrays. Minho stepped closer to the display, his expression darkening. We've observed the same behavior. They're not mindless consumers. They're strategic. They target communication first, then defense systems, then population centers. You're suggesting they're intelligent? Director Hyun asked, alarmed. Or controlled by something that is, Minho replied. A human engineer called out from across the room. Commander, we're ready to connect to the power grid. Admiral Ta nodded to Engineering Chief Kwan, who moved to assist the humans. As the two teams worked together, the initial tension began to ease slightly, replaced by the focused energy of professionals with a common goal. Minho approached Admiral Ta privately. There's something you should know. The disruptors will work, but they're not a permanent solution. They can create a safe corridor for evacuation, maybe hold the swarm at bay for a few days. But eventually, they'll adapt. Adapt? Tai asked quietly. They learn, Admiral. Each encounter makes them stronger, more resistant. We need to do more than just defend. We need to find a way to send them back where they came from. Before Tai could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Lieutenant Park's voice came over the comm system. Admiral, the swarm has accelerated. New estimated time of arrival. 2 hours. Minho and Tai exchanged a look of shared concern. Their time had just been cut by more than half. Get those disruptors online now, Tai ordered. The uncomfortable alliance had suddenly become their only hope of survival. They don't follow any established combat doctrine, Officer Jun observed, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The human ships moved in patterns that defied conventional military strategy, breaking and reforming their formations with seemingly reckless abandon. 2 small human vessels had just flown directly into the path of a void swarm tendril, only to veer away at the last possible moment, leading the tendril into the firing line of a larger Alliance cruiser. The command center of the Alliance flagship hummed with tense activity as officers tracked both the human fleet and the advancing swarm. The evacuation of Starbase Wook was complete, but the station itself remained vital, its powerful quantum disruptors creating the only safe corridor through which refugee ships could escape. That's their strength, Admiral Ta replied, surprising his staff. His 4 tentacles moved in a pattern that indicated deep thought as he studied the human tactics. They adapt. We've spent centuries perfecting our strategies. They create new ones on the fly. Commander Jin looked skeptical. But Admiral, their formations have no cohesion, no clear defensive structure. They're exposing themselves to unnecessary risk. Are they? Tai asked quietly. On the screen, a human ship darted dangerously close to a swarm tendril, drawing it away from a vulnerable Alliance vessel. Look more closely. What appears chaotic is actually highly responsive. They're not following a predetermined plan. They're reacting to each movement of the swarm in real time. The Alliance had deployed its fleet in the textbook 7th Formation, a defensive arrangement developed over centuries of military theory. It was perfect in its geometric precision, designed to provide maximum coverage with minimal vulnerability. Yet the swarm had already found ways to probe its weaknesses, moving with an intelligence that became more apparent with each passing hour. "Admiral," Communications Officer Han called out, "Captain Du is requesting permission to lead a strike force into the HFY Nebula. He believes the ionic interference there will limit the swarm's ability to maintain cohesion." Tactical Officer Sung immediately objected. "The HFY Nebula. Our ships would be flying blind in there. Sensors would be useless. Communications severely limited. It's a tactical nightmare." "That's exactly why Captain Du wants to go there," Tay realized. "The swarm relies on some form of internal communication to maintain its collective behavior. The nebula might disrupt that just as it would disrupt our systems." The command staff fell silent, considering this unconventional approach. "It's a significant risk," Commander Jin finally said. "Our fleet doctrines specifically warn against engagement in sensor-obscuring phenomena. And that doctrine has served us well in conventional warfare," Tay acknowledged. "But this enemy is anything but conventional." He made his decision. "Tell Captain Du his request is approved. Assign strike groups 3 and 4 to support his vessels." As the orders were relayed, Science Officer Sunwoo approached the Admiral's station. "Sir, I've been working with the human scientists. We've made a discovery about the swarm's behavior." She displayed her findings on the main screen. "The swarm exhibits what humans call swarm intelligence, a collective behavior greater than the sum of its parts. But this intelligence has limitations. When portions of the swarm are isolated from the main body, they become less coordinated, almost confused." Tay's eyes widened as he understood the implications. "So if we can separate parts of the swarm, they become vulnerable," Sunwoo confirmed. The tactical display shifted to show the HFY Nebula, a vast cloud of ionized gas and dust that stretched across several light years. At its edge, the human ships and their alliance escorts were already engaging a massive tendril of the swarm. "Magnify," Tad ordered. The screen zoomed in to show the battle in detail. The human ships moved with startling coordination despite the interference from the nebula. They darted in and out of the ionized clouds, leading sections of the swarm deeper into the nebula while Alliance vessels maintained a perimeter, preventing the isolated tendrils from rejoining the main body. "They're hurting it," Officer Jun realized, like farmers guiding animals into a pen. Inside the nebula, the separated portions of the swarm began to move erratically. Without connection to the main intelligence, they lashed out blindly, often missing their targets entirely. "The quantum disruptors," Ta said suddenly. "If they're more effective against isolated portions of the swarm." He didn't need to finish the thought. Tactical Officer Sun was already relaying new orders to the fleet. 6 Alliance cruisers, each equipped with modified disruptors based on human technology, moved into position around the nebula's perimeter. "Disruptors charged and ready," Sun reported. "Tell all ships to pull back," Tay ordered. "Then fire." The screen flashed as 6 quantum disruption fields activated simultaneously, converging on the trapped section of the swarm. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Without connection to its main body and bombarded by the disruption fields, the isolated tendril began to break apart, its countless organisms losing cohesion. For the first time, they witnessed the swarm actually diminish rather than grow. "It's working," breathed Commander Jin. As the combined fleet engaged the swarm at the HFY Nebula, human improvisation, paired with council precision, created an unexpected advantage. The swarm retreated for the first time in recorded history. "They're pulling back," Officer Jum announced, his voice rising with excitement. "The main body is actually retreating from the nebula." A cheer went up from the command staff, quickly silenced by Admiral Tay's raised hand. "This is not victory," he cautioned. "It's merely our first successful defense, but it proves the swarm can be fought. It can be driven back." He turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to Captain Du." When the human captain's face appeared on screen, his expression was tired but determined. Your strategy worked, Captain, Tay acknowledged. The Alliance owes you a debt of gratitude. Du shook his head. This was a joint effort, Admiral. Your ships executed the containment pattern perfectly. We've discovered something important today. Alone, neither of us could have succeeded. Together, we have a chance. Ta nodded, understanding the significance of this moment. Two civilizations, so different in their approaches and philosophies, had found strength in their differences rather than conflict. Prepare the fleet, Tai ordered his staff. The swarm has tasted defeat. Now we push our advantage. The Grand Hall of Unity aboard the rebuilt Starbase Wook gleamed with polished surfaces and soft lighting. Representatives from 27 Alliance species filled the chamber, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of galactic life. In the 3 months since the first successful defense against the Void Swarm, much had changed. The immediate crisis had been contained, though the war continued on distant fronts. Today marked a historic occasion, the formal integration of humans into the Galactic Alliance. Admiral Ta stood near the front of the hall, his tentacles adorned with the traditional silver bands of high ceremony. He watched as Alliance officials fussed over last-minute details, adding decorative elements and adjusting the ceremonial artifacts that would normally accompany such a momentous event. The human delegation, led by Representative Chunho, had politely but firmly requested a streamlined ceremony. This had initially confused and even offended some council species, for whom elaborate rituals spanning days or weeks were the only proper way to mark significant occasions. Are you certain we cannot include the ritual of 7 statements? Council member Yuma had asked Shunho earlier that day. It would only add 4 hours to the proceedings. Junho had smiled diplomatically. We deeply respect your traditions, but perhaps we might save the fuller ceremonies for a time when we aren't actively fighting an existential threat. Now, as the appointed time arrived, the gathered representatives took their places. The ceremony was brief, another human preference that had initially confused council species. No 3-day fasting period, no ritual exchange of ancestral histories, no symbolic rebirth ceremonies that the Traxians had insisted were absolutely essential. Instead, after a simple musical introduction performed by a mixed group of human and Alliance musicians, Director Hyun stepped to the center of the hall. His purple skin had faded somewhat with age and stress, but his voice remained strong as it carried through the chamber. We formalized this alliance not just for defense, but understanding, Director Hyun announced. The misinterpretation that almost led us to war has taught us a valuable lesson. He gestured to a display showing the first encounter between human and Alliance ships, the moment when fear and misunderstanding had nearly sparked a conflict that would have left both civilizations vulnerable to the swarm. Throughout our long history, the Alliance has prided itself on careful deliberation, on consensus building, on protocols developed over centuries. Him continued. These values have served us well. But the Void Swarm taught us that there are times when immediate action is necessary. In the audience, Admiral Ta noticed communications specialist Eun sitting quietly among her colleagues. Her discovery of the true nature of the human transmissions had earned her a promotion and recognition throughout the Alliance. Yet she seemed uncomfortable with the attention, preferring to focus on her ongoing work improving cross-species communication systems. Human Representative Junho stepped forward. Tall and dignified in a simple blue uniform, he had emerged as a natural bridge between human and Alliance cultures. His calm demeanor and patient explanations had helped ease tensions during the difficult early days of cooperation. Our differences nearly destroyed us, Junho said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. Now they'll be our greatest asset. He activated a holographic display showing the successful battle at the Hasek Nebula. The moment when human adaptability combined with Alliance precision had first turned the tide against the swarm. Humans value decisive action. The Alliance values careful consideration. Apart, each approach has weaknesses. Together, they create balance. Junho continued. We bring different perspectives, different solutions. This diversity gives us strength against an enemy that adapts to any single approach. Director Hyun and Representative Juno each placed their hands, and in Hyun's case, two upper tentacles, on the Alliance Charter. A new section glowed as it was activated, formally recognizing humanity as a full member of the Galactic Alliance, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. A new communication protocol was established, along with a human seat on the Council. The galaxy would never again mistake urgency for aggression. After the ceremony, Admiral Tai approached Captain Du, who had been standing quietly at the back of the hall. The human captain still bore his scars proudly, though his cybernetic eye had been upgraded with Alliance technology. "Too formal for your taste?" Tai asked, attempting the human practice of small talk that he had been studying. Du smiled slightly. "Actually, by human standards, that was still rather elaborate. But we're learning to appreciate your ways, just as you're adapting to ours." Speaking of adaptation, Ta said, his tone growing serious, "The latest reports from the outer defenses show that the swarm is evolving new tactics." Du finished. "I know. That's why I'm heading back out tomorrow with the joint fleet." Ta nodded. "The quantum disruptors won't work forever. The swarm adapts to everything we throw at it. So we'll keep creating new solutions," Du said with the characteristic human confidence that had once seemed like recklessness to Ta, but now felt reassuring. "Between your scientific foundations and our improvisational approach, we'll stay ahead of them." Across the room, Science Officer Sunwoo was deep in conversation with her human counterpart, Dr. Kang. Their combined research teams had already developed 3 new weapons systems by merging Alliance fundamental science with human experimental methods. "I believe you're right," Ta said. "Though I admit, I never expected to find such value in what once seemed like human chaos." Instead, after a simple musical introduction performed by a mixed group of human and Alliance musicians, Director Hyun stepped to the center of the hall. His purple skin had faded somewhat with age and stress, but his voice remained strong as it carried through the chamber. "We formalized this alliance not just for defense, but understanding," Director Hyun announced. "The misinterpretation that almost led us to war has taught us a valuable lesson." He gestured to a display showing the first encounter between human and Alliance ships, the moment when fear and misunderstanding had nearly sparked a conflict that would have left both civilizations vulnerable to the swarm. Throughout our long history, the Alliance has prided itself on careful deliberation, on consensus building, on protocols developed over centuries, Hyun continued. "These values have served us well. But the Void Swarm taught us that there are times when immediate action is necessary." In the audience, Admiral Ta noticed communications specialist Hyun sitting quietly among her colleagues. Her discovery of the true nature of the human transmissions had earned her a promotion and recognition throughout the Alliance. Yet she seemed uncomfortable with the attention, preferring to focus on her ongoing work improving cross-species communication systems. Human Representative Juno stepped forward. Tall and dignified in a simple blue uniform, he had emerged as a natural bridge between human and Alliance cultures. His calm demeanor and patient explanations had helped ease tensions during the difficult early days of cooperation. "Our differences nearly destroyed us," Junho said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "Now they'll be our greatest asset." He activated a holographic display showing the successful battle at the Hasek Nebula. The moment when human adaptability combined with Alliance precision had first turned the tide against the swarm. Humans value decisive action. The Alliance values careful consideration. Apart, each approach has weaknesses. Together, they create balance, Juno continued. "We bring different perspectives, different solutions. This diversity gives us strength against an enemy that adapts to any single approach." Director Hyun and Representative Juno each placed their hands, and in Hyun's case, 2 upper tentacles, on the Alliance Charter. A new section glowed as it was activated, formally recognizing humanity as a full member of the Galactic Alliance with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. A new communication protocol was established, along with a human seat on the Council. The galaxy would never again mistake urgency for aggression. After the ceremony, Admiral Tai approached Captain Du, who had been standing quietly at the back of the hall. The human captain still bore his scars proudly, though his cybernetic eye had been upgraded with Alliance technology. "Too formal for your taste?" Tai asked, attempting the human practice of small talk that he had been studying. Du smiled slightly. "Actually, by human standards, that was still rather elaborate. But we're learning to appreciate your ways, just as you're adapting to ours." "Speaking of adaptation," Ta said, his tone growing serious, "the latest reports from the outer defenses show that the swarm is evolving new tactics," Du finished. "I know. That's why I'm heading back out tomorrow with the joint fleet." Ta nodded. "The quantum disruptors won't work forever. The swarm adapts to everything we throw at it. So we'll keep creating new solutions," Du said with the characteristic human confidence that had once seemed like recklessness to Ta, but now felt reassuring. "Between your scientific foundations and our improvisational approach, we'll stay ahead of them." Across the room, Science Officer Sunwoo was deep in conversation with her human counterpart, Dr. Kang. Their combined research teams had already developed 3 new weapons systems by merging Alliance fundamental science with human experimental methods. "I believe you're right," Ta said. "Though I admit, I never expected to find such value in what once seemed like human chaos. And we never expected to find such strength in what seemed like Alliance inflexibility," Du replied with a small smile. "Funny how perspectives change when survival depends on it." As guests began to mingle, sharing food and stories, Tai observed the various species interacting with the humans. There were still moments of confusion, cultural misunderstandings, and the occasional social faux pas, but the underlying tension that had marked the early days was gone. In its place was something new, a recognition that different approaches to the same problem weren't threats to be feared, but resources to be valued. The galaxy faced its greatest challenge in the form of the Void Swarm, but it did so with a new understanding. Diversity wasn't just about different forms of life, but different ways of thinking, and that perhaps more than any weapon or strategy would be what saved them all in the end.